She vanished without a sound, without a struggle, without a single trace. In the dead of night, a brilliant young student disappeared from her own home. No signs of forced entry. No cries for help. Just an eerie silence and an empty space where she should have been. What began as a routine missing persons report quickly spiraled into something far darker. And as investigators followed the faintest of trails, what they uncovered would shock the entire nation. Her name was Eve Carson, born November 19, 1985, in Athens, Georgia. From a young age, she stood apart, not just for her intelligence, but for her unshakable purpose. In high school, she was vice president of the student council, a volunteer for the elderly and abused teens, a congressional page, and even assisted in stem cell research, all while still a teenager. When she arrived at the University of North Carolina, she soared. Double major, political science and biology. Honors student. Scholarship winner. A campus leader. She taught science to children, led student groups, and traveled the world to serve, from Ecuador to Cuba to Egypt. She was 22, in her final year of college, with a career lined up and a future glowing ahead of her. But on the night of March 5, around 1:30 a.m., Eve's world, and everyone who loved her, fell into silence. Her roommates had left for a party. Eve stayed behind. And by morning, she was gone. She could have gone with them. Her friends had invited her to join the party, one last break before the grind of exams. But Eve, ever the focused student, politely declined. She stayed behind to study, never knowing it would be the last night of her life. Around 4:30 a.m., her roommates returned, laughter fading as they approached the house. The front door was wide open. The lights were still on. But Eve was gone. Her car. Gone too. None of it made sense. Eve wasn't reckless. She wasn't the type to leave in the middle of the night, especially without locking the door. They tried calling. No answer. Still clinging to hope, they waited, believing she'd walk back through the door any moment. But by morning, hope gave way to dread. A missing person report was filed, and what police said next froze the air in the room. Earlier that morning, around 5 a.m., a woman just a mile away had called 911. She'd been jolted awake by the sound of gunshots, followed by a scream so raw it cut through the silence. When officers arrived, they found the body of a young woman lying in the street. No phone. No ID. Just silence, and blood. She'd been shot multiple times. When police showed Eve's friend the photo, she didn't need more than a glance, it was her. The girl full of life, now lifeless on the pavement. From that moment, the investigation turned urgent. A timeline formed. Eve was last seen alive at 1:30 a.m. At 5 a.m., she was found dead. What happened in those missing hours? Who had taken her, and why? Her car was gone. Her wallet and credit cards were missing. No signs of sexual assault. No phone. Everything pointed to a calculated robbery. Then, finally, a break. A car matching Eve's was discovered, abandoned just a few miles away. Detectives moved fast. The vehicle was towed for DNA testing and fingerprint analysis. The killer had left the scene, but had they left behind a clue? As the hours ticked by, detectives uncovered something crucial, buried in digital silence. Eve's laptop, the one she'd been using to study, showed activity until 3:30 a.m. That meant she was alive, and still at home, for 2 full hours after her friends had left for the party. She wasn't taken immediately, which raised a chilling possibility: someone had either waited, or watched. The public didn't yet know the details, but the impact of Eve's murder had already shattered the city. On campus, the news hit like an earthquake. She wasn't just another student, she was the student. The kind who lit up every room, led every cause, and left her mark everywhere she went. Now, she was gone, and with no suspects in sight, fear began to spread. students grew cautious. Locking doors. Avoiding late nights. Whispering warnings. And as panic grew, so did the pressure. Tips flooded in, sightings, suspicions, rumors, anything that might help solve the case. But none of it brought police any closer to the truth. Until they checked her bank records. At exactly 3:48 a.m., just 18 minutes after Eve stopped using her computer, someone withdrew $700 from her account. 2 back-to-back ATM transactions. Both just below the withdrawal limit. The machine. Located on the far side of town, nowhere near where her body was found. Investigators raced to the scene and pulled surveillance footage. What they saw chilled them. A man, sitting inside Eve's car, calmly inserting her card. In the back seat, a shadow. A figure. Possibly another person. Could it have been Eve? The image was too grainy to tell. Forensics tried to enhance the video, but it was no use. And the man in the video? He didn't stop there. He hit multiple ATMs across the city, always using Eve's card. But none of the machines had working cameras, until March 7th. Another attempt. Another location. A 24-hour convenience store in a neighboring town. The card was declined, but the camera was rolling. And what detectives saw wasn't the same man. A different face. A new suspect. Now, police had to ask, was this a team? A killer with an accomplice? Or had Eve's stolen card been passed to someone else? Again, the footage was poor. No clear ID. No names. Just shadows. Desperate for answers, investigators turned to the public. 2 photos, 2 unknown men, released to the media. The clock was ticking. And someone out there knew the truth. The city was drowning in tips. Anonymous calls. Desperate leads. Every face seemed suspect. But for all the noise, the case remained painfully cold. Until March 12th. That's when the phone rang. And this time. It mattered. A voice, cloaked in anonymity, claimed to recognize the second man from the convenience store footage. His name? Dario Atwater. Just 21 years old, yet already steeped in crime. Robbery. Assault. Drugs. In and out of jail. Released early. Repeatedly. And just 2 days after Eve's murder, he was due in court for carrying a handgun while on probation. The pieces snapped into place. Detectives compared mugshots to the surveillance footage. The match was undeniable. The man from the video was Dario, and he lived just blocks from the store. Officers moved quickly, cornering him at his home. He denied everything, but denial doesn't erase evidence. He was arrested on the spot. But this wasn't over, far from it. Dario had been in constant contact with someone else. A 17-year-old. Already known to police. Already dangerous. His name was Lawrence Lovett. When detectives pulled his mugshot, their hearts froze. It was the same boy seen behind the wheel of Eve's car. Caught on the first ATM camera. But Lawrence wasn't going quietly. He barricaded himself in his house. SWAT was called. After a tense standoff, he was arrested, and like Dario, claimed innocence. Both were charged. Both behind bars. But neither was talking. So investigators turned to science. Cell tower data revealed a dark truth: both of their phones had pinged near Eve's neighborhood the night she vanished, even though they lived in another city. It now appeared that Eve wasn't targeted, she was chosen. Randomly. 2 predators, driving through a quiet neighborhood, hunting for an opportunity, and saw a girl alone by her window. The plan? A quick robbery. Get in. Get cash. Get out. But it became something far worse. They forced Eve into her own car. Drove her across the city. Made her empty her bank account. She cooperated. She begged. She promised not to say a word. But it wasn't enough. Once they reached the woods, they made a choice. 2 guns. Multiple bullets. No mercy. Diario later confessed to everything. In exchange for avoiding the death penalty, he admitted it all. Lawrence had called him with a plan to rob someone from campus. When they saw Eve, they acted. No masks. No hesitation. Eve pleaded for her life. And in a moment that haunts forever, she asked them to pray with her. Instead, they executed her. Cold. Ruthless. In April 2010, 2 years after the murder, Diario was sentenced to life in prison plus 30 years. In court, he turned to Eve's parents, apologized, and said he deserved it. Lawrence refused to plead guilty. His trial began in December 2011. Despite his defense, Diario's confession and the evidence crushed his case. He was sentenced to life. But his story didn't end there. In 2013, an appeals court overturned his sentence, arguing that life without parole for a minor was too severe. He got a second trial. This time, he spoke. Claimed he wasn't a monster. That everyone makes mistakes. But he showed no real remorse. Only performance. The judge saw through it. Lawrence was sentenced again, to life behind bars. And while justice had been served, a dark cloud lingered. Because just months before Eve's death, another student had been killed in eerily similar circumstances. A break-in. A robbery. ATM withdrawals. Lawrence was a suspect, but the case fell apart. Not enough evidence. No charges filed. And so, 2 lives were taken. 1 known. 1 still unanswered. And behind it all, a single question remains: how many more were there, before someone finally stopped them? Eve's story didn't just haunt a campus, it shook a nation. And it didn't end in silence. It sparked action. In the wake of her murder, the state of North Carolina moved swiftly. Lawmakers passed legislation aimed at cracking down on gang-related crimes, tougher penalties, stricter oversight, and a louder message: justice will not be delayed. The law took effect on December 1st. And it carried her name in spirit. Eve Carson, a student who believed in change, became the catalyst for it. At the University of North Carolina, her memory lives on in more than just words. A scholarship was created in her honor. A memorial garden now blooms at the heart of campus, quiet, solemn, sacred. A place where the wind whispers her legacy. Where students pause, and remember. But Eve's impact reached even further. In February 2009, one of her closest friends stood under the stage lights of American Idol. Before millions, he shared the story of Eve, how her courage, her drive, her unshakable belief in living boldly, pushed him to chase his own dream. Without her, he said, he never would have dared. Eve Carson's light was stolen far too soon. But it didn't vanish. It ignited something bigger, in laws, in hearts, in every life she touched. If Eve's story moved you, remember her not just as a victim, but as a voice. A leader. A force for good. And if you want more true stories like this, raw, real, unforgettable, make sure to like this video and subscribe. We bring you gripping crime documentaries every night. Until next time. Stay sharp. Stay vigilant. And never forget, one voice can change everything. Lesson 1. Even the brightest lights can be targeted. Eve Carson wasn't just any student, she was the heart of her campus. Smart. Driven. Kind. She volunteered, she led, she inspired. The kind of person you'd never imagine becoming a victim. And yet, she was. Her murder reminds us of a heartbreaking truth: being good doesn't guarantee safety. Evil doesn't choose based on merit. It doesn't see GPA, charity work, or dreams. It sees opportunity. That's what makes it so dangerous. Eve's light didn't protect her from the darkness that found her. For us, the lesson is clear: stay aware, no matter how bright your world seems. Trust your instincts. Don't ignore red flags. And always remember that tragedy can touch even the most hopeful souls. We can't live in fear, but we must live in reality. Being kind and brilliant doesn't make you invincible. But knowing that, being cautious, alert, and prepared, might save your life or someone else's. Eve's story isn't meant to inspire paranoia, it's meant to open our eyes. Because sometimes, the most tragic stories begin in the most peaceful places. 2. Random crimes are real, and terrifying. We like to think everything happens for a reason. That crimes have logic. That if we avoid bad neighborhoods, bad people, or bad choices, we'll stay safe. But Eve Carson's murder shattered that illusion. She was home. Studying. Surrounded by friends. She did everything right. And still, she became the target of a random, senseless act of violence. That's what makes this story so chilling. It wasn't personal. It was pure chance. Two strangers driving through a neighborhood, looking for someone, anyone, to rob. And Eve, alone by a window, became the one they chose. There was no history. No motive. Just opportunity, and brutality. This reminds us that danger doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes, it comes quietly. Without reason. Without warning. That doesn't mean we should live in fear, but we must stop believing, it won't happen to me. Because sometimes, it does. Awareness, preparation, and prevention are not paranoia, they're protection. This case is a haunting reminder that randomness is real. And in a world where anything can happen, sometimes, the only defense is being ready for the unthinkable. 3. True evil often comes in familiar faces. When we imagine killers, we think of monsters, menacing, deranged, obvious. But reality is far more disturbing. Eve's killers weren't adults with long rap sheets and hardened expressions. One was a teenager. The other, barely out of his teens. No masks. No disguises. Just two boys who could have passed for classmates. That's the horror of it. Evil isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's soft-spoken. Sometimes, it smiles. Sometimes, it hides in plain sight. Lawrence Lovett and Demario Atwater didn't look like villains. But they carried out a crime so cold, so senseless, it left the nation in shock. This teaches us an uncomfortable truth: danger doesn't always look dangerous. We must stop expecting evil to come with warning signs. Sometimes, it's polite. Young. Quiet. Familiar. And that's what makes it powerful. This story is not just about Eve's murder, it's about the masks evil wears. It's about understanding that people aren't always what they seem. And if we want to protect ourselves and those we love, we must learn to see beyond appearances, to ask hard questions, and to stay aware, even when everything, and everyone, seems normal. 4. One act of violence can echo across a nation. One night. One crime. One life stolen. And yet, the ripples were felt across an entire country. Eve Carson's murder didn't just devastate a family or a college campus. It transformed legislation. It changed how people thought about safety, justice, and youth violence. Her case led to new laws in North Carolina targeting gang-related crimes. Strangers mourned her. National headlines carried her name. Students thousands of miles away began locking their doors. That's the haunting power of violence: it spreads. It echoes. One act can alter lives forever. But in that same echo, is the potential for change. For accountability. For action. Eve's death forced society to look in the mirror and ask hard questions. Are we doing enough to prevent this? Are our systems failing the innocent? That's the legacy of tragedy, it either breaks us or reshapes us. And in Eve's case, it reshaped. But the lesson is sobering. Violence doesn't end with the trigger. Its aftermath is long. It's emotional. It's political. So when we think of crime, we must think bigger than headlines. Because every victim's story is a stone, and every stone creates waves that touch us all. 5. Legacies aren't defined by death, but by how you lived. Eve Carson was taken too soon, but she was never truly lost. Because her legacy didn't end with her final breath, it began with how she lived. She wasn't just a student, she was a leader, a giver, a dreamer. She taught kids science. She served abroad. She lit up her university with compassion, vision, and action. And even after death, she continues to inspire. Scholarships now carry her name. A garden blooms where her memory is honored. And people, strangers, still tell her story, still learn from her life. That's what legacy means. It's not the manner of death, it's the meaning of life. Eve reminds us that what we do matters. That kindness echoes. That impact survives. You don't need to be famous to leave something behind, you just need to live with purpose. Her killers tried to erase her future. But instead, they amplified her voice. So ask yourself, what legacy are you leaving? Because long after we're gone, the world remembers not how we died, but what we did with the time we had. And Eve Carson made hers count.